Good morning, dear students. Now let us start with chapter number 8, that is how do organisms reproduce. Now it's a very interesting chapter and it is mostly related to your life. So you can see some live examples in this. Now in the vegetative as well in the asexual reproduction as well as in the sexual reproduction. It's a very interesting chapter. I will show you some interesting videos related to the reproduction. Okay, now let us start with the introduction. What are the contents to be involved or included in this chapter are what is reproduction, the importance of reproduction, the types of reproduction, that is sexual and the asexual reproduction. Clear? Now in this chapter we are going to learn so many interesting things. Clear? Now reproduction. We will start with the introduction, that is reproduction. It's an integral feature of all living beings. Means we already know that the living organisms show particular characteristics. One of the characteristics of the living organisms is the reproduction. The process by which a living organisms produce their own kind of organism or own the self organism like them only is process is called as the reproduction. Now how it is important then? It's very important for each species because this is the only way for a living being to continue their lineage, or we can say continue their history, or we can say continue their species. What will happen if the reproduction does not happen? Any of the species which do not reproduce, it will stop its generation. It will not produce the next generation and that species will be getting extinguished, or we can say removed from the earth. So to avoid this, all the living organisms, they reproduce. Apart from being important for a particular individual, reproduction is also important for the whole ecosystem. To maintain the ecosystem, what will happen if a particular organism is removed from the ecosystem? The food chain, the food web which is occurring in the nature, it will get disturbed. Clear? So to continue the ecosystem, to maintain the ecosystem, this reproduction is very important process. The reproduction helps in maintaining a proper balance among various biotic constituents of the ecosystem. Moreover, reproduction also facilitates evolution because variations come through the reproduction and over a several generation. We already know how the organisms are evolved. The single cell organisms, how they are converted into the multicellular organisms. We have studied in previous classes how the changes took place and how the highly developed organisms like mammals are developed. Clear? This is because of the variation which occurred in the past. Okay. Now the reproduction, it is basically of two types, sexual reproduction and the asexual reproduction. We will study in detail about them. The types of reproduction, two main types, asexual and the sexual. When a single parent is involved and no gametes formation takes place, here the important word is the gamete formation. If the gamete formation is taking place, then it is a sexual reproduction, and if the gamete formation does not take place, it is a asexual reproduction. This method is called as the asexual reproduction. No meiosis happens during the asexual reproduction. While the sexual reproduction, two parents are involved and the gamete formation takes place. This method is called as the sexual reproduction. The meiosis takes place during the gamete formation, which is an important step of sexual reproduction. Now meiosis and mitosis, I think you have studied in previous classes. I have told you about this. Okay? Now first we will start with the asexual reproduction. Clear? The asexual reproduction, it is again of different types. Okay? Basically 6 types of asexual reproduction are there. First one is the fusion, then the budding, the regeneration, fragmentation, spore formation and the vegetative propagation. We will study about one by one. Fission. This word you have heard whenever a thing is breaking down into two. Lysis. Fission is also called as the lysis. And this fission of basically two types, the binary fission and the multiple fission. Fission, the most common mode of reproduction in unicellular organisms, or the most of the unicellular organisms prefer this mode of reproduction. These organisms reproduce by binary fission, especially when conditions are favorable, that is adequate amount of food and moisture is available for them. The mother cell divides into two daughter cells, and each daughter cell begins its life as a new individual. This parent's generation ceases to exist after binary fission. The amoeba is a very good example. This slide is showing you the reproduction in amoeba, or we can say the binary fission in amoeba. This same diagram is, I think, given in your book also. Clear? It is reproducing by binary fission. See what happens. The parent cell first divides its nuclei. Nucleus divides into two. Then the cytoplasm divides to start. The cytoplasmic constriction come here, and what happens? A complete breakdown of the cytoplasm takes place, and the two daughter cells are formed. Clear? From a single parent cell, if two daughter cells are formed, this is called as the binary fission. Clear? So this is the binary fission in amoeba. Apart from this, one more type of reproduction or fission takes place, that is the multiple fission. See, this is the binary fission in protozoa. I will show you a video actually which will give you the clear idea about this asexual mode of reproduction. Clear? Now the multiple fission. Multiple fission when a conditions become unfavorable, that is food, moisture, proper temperature, humidity, if it's not available, this is preferring, or this mode of reproduction is preferred by unicellular organisms. The organisms develop a thick coating around themselves called as the cyst. See, this is also shown in your book, I think. The direct cyst formation. The nucleus repeatedly divides, multiple division of nucleus takes place, and the many nuclei are produced in the cell, and hard covering. See here, the light orange color coating is shown over here. This is called as the cyst. This is called as the cyst, and this cyst help the organisms to tide over the bad phase, or this acting as a protection for them. The nucleus divides into several nuclei, and each daughter nuclei is surrounded by a membrane. When a favorable condition returns, the cyst dissolves or breaks down and release the daughter nuclei. The daughter nuclei in turn grow into the new individual. The organisms like Plasmodium and amoeba, these are undergoing the cyst stage when they are not in the body of their prime host, or that is in the human. Means these parasitic organisms, if they do not get the host body, they are forming the cyst, and whenever they get a favorable condition, they cyst lysis, or the cyst breaks down and releases the daughter cells. Clear? So this is the multiple fission. Clear? Now next one is the budding. Budding in yeast, I think you have studied in previous classes also. Yeast is an example of unicellular organisms which reproduce by budding. Hydra is also an example of multicellular organisms reproducing by budding. The budding in yeast, a small bud or the outgrowth grows on a end of a yeast cell, and the nucleus gets elongated and a part of it protrudes into the bud. The nucleus then divides into two nuclei. One of the nuclei goes into the bud. The bud grows to certain extent and get detached from the mother cell. This is how the budding in yeast takes place. See here, the picture is shown you. Budding in yeast. See how this is taking place. The matured yeast cell, it develops a bud on its surface and it continues to grow. Whenever it matures, it detaches from the mother cell and live as a new living organism. Budding in hydra is also similar to this. The bud or outgrowth goes on the main body of the hydra, and the bud grows to a certain size and gets detached from the mother hydra. This develops further to grow into the new individual. This diagram, I think it's not given in the slide, but you already studied about the budding in hydra in lower classes. Okay. The next is the fragmentation. As the name suggests, the organisms repeatedly or accidentally, if it is breaking down into the fragments, these are developing into the new organisms. Each piece develops into the new individual. The best example we can give of the spirogyra is given here. See in the picture, it's clear. If the spirogyra, this filamentous algae basically divides by this fragmentation mode. Accidentally or by any method, if they are breaking down into the fragments, the filament of the spirogyra divides into many pieces, and each piece develop into a new individual. This we call it as a fragmentation. Okay. The regeneration, some simple organisms can regenerate a new individual from a part which has been accidentally cut off. The planaria shows good example of reproduction by regeneration. Regeneration, it's slightly different, or we can say it's different in little way from the fragmentation, because in this the organism accidentally cut off, and if it is having the specialized cell. Now when this regeneration will take place, whenever the organism or the fragment have a specialized cell for regeneration. The example of diagram is given in your book also. The planaria. If a planaria is cut into several pieces, each piece develops into a new individual. Okay? This is the common mode of reproduction in the planarians. Okay? Fragmentation and regeneration differentiate from each other in a small way. The fragmentation does not require any specialized cell for reproduction or forming the new cell, while the regeneration requires the specialized cell. Clear? Spore formation, most of the fungus and the bryophytes, pteridophytes, they reproduce by this method. The spores. Now what are the spores then? Spores are the reproductive cells which are having the hard coat on their surface, which can survive in the unfavorable condition also. Clear? ये जो spores होते हैं, spores are the hard, tough asexual bodies, or the reproductive bodies or the reproductive cells. Whenever they get a favorable condition, they can grow into the new organisms. Most of the fungi, bryophytes, pteridophytes reproduce by this method. Spores are produced in special spore-bearing organs, that is sporangium. When the spores mature, the sporangium bursts open to release them. The advantages of spore formation, in fact, this question is asked in your examination. What are the advantages of spore formation? The spores give a certain several benefits to the organisms which is reproduced by spores. Spores can be disseminated through air, water, or even through some other carriers like animals. This helps an organism to spread its presence to a wider geographical area. The spores can also remain dormant for a long period of time. Means this hard covering over the spores help them to survive in the unfavorable condition for a long period of time till they get the favorable conditions. Clear? Scientists consider spores as the precursors of the seed. जैसे पहले अभी हम seeds देखते हैं seed bearing plants में, the spores are the precursors of seeds, we can say. Clear? जैसे अभी seeds काम करते हैं to grow the new plant, the spores develop to new organism. Clear? See, this is the best example. If you keep the bread or chapati open for some days, 1 or 2 days, if you keep it open, what will happen? The spores in the air will come on the surface and they will germinate as soon as they will get the moisture. This is the spore formation, and number of examples you can see around yourself. Clear? Last mode of the asexual reproduction is the vegetative propagation. Vegetative propagation is a special case as it happens in higher plants which otherwise have the capability to reproduce sexually. When a vegetative part of a flowering plant reproduces a new plant, it is called as the vegetative propagation. Some examples of vegetative propagation are like leaf of bryophyllum, the tuber of potato, the we can say the roots of dahlia. These are the some vegetative parts of the plants which reproduce asexually. The leaf of bryophyllum, you already studied about this. The leaf of bryophyllum has a notches or the buds on the margin, and if the leaf is put under the soil, or if by chance these buds detach from the surface of leaf and fall on the soil, this grow into a new organism or a new plant, new bryophyllum plant. Clear? This is the a vegetative propagation. The roots of some plants can also grow into a new organism. This is also an example of vegetative propagation. Clear? The stem of some plants, they are growing into new. This is also called as the vegetative propagation. Clear? The artificial vegetative propagation, the man has used the vegetative propagation to grow many plants. This has enabled farmers and horticulturists to grow many plants in the shorter duration and has helped them to earn more profit. This is the most common mode of reproduction of growing plants nowadays. Clear? To earn more profit and to provide food and the fruits for the growing population. The artificial vegetative propagation has also helped in developing many new varieties in plants. Stem cutting, layering and grafting are the preferred means of artificial vegetative propagation. Okay. Now the important topic come here, that is the advantages of vegetative propagation. Now or we can say advantages of asexual reproduction. Clear? Advantages: the organisms do not have to depend on another organism for carrying out reproduction because a single parent can produce a organism, new individual. It takes the less time than the sexual reproduction, and hence more number of offsprings can be produced in shorter time. This is the most important advantage of asexual reproduction. It's not a time bearing process, or it takes less time than sexual reproduction, and hence more number of offsprings can be produced in short time, and that's why this is the most common mode of reproduction in plants nowadays. Clear? The offspring are exact clones of their parent. Clones means copies, or we can say the same, exact 100% identical copies of the parent. Clear? The desirable characteristics can be easily incorporated into plants with artificial vegetative propagation. You might have seen the n number of varieties of flowers, n number of colors of flowers, varieties of fruits, varieties of flowers in the market. This is the result of this or this is the advantage of the asexual reproduction only. Clear? Now along with the advantages, it has a few disadvantages also. A single parent is involved, so there is a negligible chance of variation. Variation means the changes. Variation हम next topic में पढ़ने वाले हैं. Variation का simple एक one word answer अगर है तो वो है changes. So if we have a parent which has some defects, so this will be passed to the next generation. So there are very less chances of variation or changes. In most of the cases, in simple organisms, the parent generation ceases to exist after asexual reproduction, like we have seen in case of amoeba, in case of yeast, or in some other organisms. The asexual reproduction cannot give rise to a biodiversity. Diversity means again the variety. Clear? Which is important for the healthy ecosystem. वैरायटी जो है कम देखने मिलती है हमको इन केस ऑफ द asexual reproduction. But nowadays scientists have developed so many strategies to develop the new varieties. Clear? So this is all about the advantages as well as disadvantages of asexual reproduction. Now in next lecture we will start with the sexual reproduction. Clear? It's a very important topic, so don't miss the lecture. Okay, and if you have any doubt related to this, you read the topic. If you have any doubt, you can ask me. Okay, thank you and have a good day.